What up, everybody? Welcome to The Human Occurrence. I am your host, Brent Phipps. I'd first off like to start to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this beautiful land, past, present, and future. We've got a jam-packed show for you tonight. We're going to be discussing everything death, dying, and loss. Our guest host is Dylan Hammond. This guy's an absolute legend. He is a business owner, entrepreneur, artist, and father. Buckle up, get the popcorn ready, because this show is going to be insane. Welcome to the show, brother. You look good. You've shaved your head.
Yeah, I do that. But pretty much just, it's low maintenance. So
Right, man. Look at this shit. The reason why I've got a beanie on is because out in space, and for anyone who's tuning in, my visuals on my background's in space, but my head looks like a planet. And but you're right, it's low maintenance. And when I used to try to grow hair, it actually looked like I had less. So when I shaved it, it actually looks like I got more. But you haven't got that issue.
no, not yet.
Not yet.
But you've had some interesting haircuts in the past, if I remember correctly.
All right. So I want to give a bit of a backstory of how we met. So I met Dylan at a very intoxicated time in my life. It was an interesting time. I was running through Japan, discovering myself. It was the first time I really traveled by myself. And I ended up in Okinawa. Now, Okinawa is an island, for whoever doesn't know, between mainland and Taiwan. And I actually stumbled across this little town. I think it was at Nago. Was it called Nago, the town? I think it was close.
I can't remember the town.
It was like a couple of hours north of Naha. So I think it was Nago, but it was like a little town called Beach Rock Village. I was there for like 6 months. And I think Dylan came in with two other people. I forget their names. I think it was
There was three others actually. It was Daniela, Keske, and
that's
I
right.
can't remember.
That's right. But I remember distinctly you coming into the bar. It was about 3 months into it, and it was the first time I ever seen someone white and who could speak English. And I was like, fuck, this is amazing. And then, with a lot of sake and I think cooking wine, we hit it off. How long were you in Beach Rock?
Yeah. I think it was close to 3 months, something like that.
Man, when I got out,
a long time.
When I got out, I was like, whoa, that was a journey.
It was an interesting bubble. It was such a cool place to be, basically it was, you choose a profession or, a job, and we'd chosen carpentry. I think the summer before that, I'd built myself a foosball table because I'd gotten addicted to foosball at the in Falls Creek in the snowfields.
That's right.
And so that was probably one of the first things I'd built. And they said, "Oh, do you have any qualifications?" I said, "Oh, well, I've built a foosball table."
You're the head carpenter.
Yeah. So we started building beds and staircases and fixing things, and we shouldn't have been doing any of that.
I know. It was a really interesting time, and I actually, bringing back memories talking of it, was that whole dog situation where there was a dog that was tied up every day for so long, and Dylan and I, like, because he was tied up near the sheds where we were kind of working and getting all our materials in it, and I remember seeing this dog, and Dylan and I were like, I don't know what happened there. We didn't want to, because we were thinking of actually getting sleeping tablets, because it was really really kind of not beaten up, but just really not treated well, right?
It was really malnourished, and it was very aggressive, and it was obviously abused, and it was old, and it would just sit there in this sort of depressed state of, hopelessness. And you and I felt, I don't know, we felt responsible for it in some way. And I remember one day you tried to befriend it because you thought, oh, we've been working alongside this dog for, so many weeks. And you just kind of thought, oh, I'm a nice guy. I'll just try and, befriend the dog and pat him and stuff. And you got bit on the hand. And, we sort of thought we had this huge conundrum, and it went on for the whole time we were there, basically. And we thought that we would be doing the dog a service by putting him down. So we had this we had this whole plan, but what stopped us is I don't know if you remember, but we decided that perhaps the dog was reincarnated. He was possibly a murderer or a rapist or something like that.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
We concluded that he was there for a reason, and that his spirit was trapped in that existence for a reason. So we ended up letting it be, but we got very close. We got very close.
What a journey!
I think we even went to Naha and got the tablets. That's how close we were.
We're gonna wrap it up in like some meat or something, and then give it to him. And I remember there was a really healthy dog there. It was a really proud dog. It's like it wasn't a Labrador or some other dog. Do you remember that dog? He was I forget. You know the guy with white hair that kind of ran the joint, because he actually passed. But there was the guy who was riding the horses, and he's kind of was the boss man of the place. I think he owned the land or something.
Yeah, that was like it was his property.
Yeah, rented it off him anyway. That was a journey, mate. Anyway, while we're here, and thanks for coming on, man, because I think it takes a shitload of courage to step into this conversation that we're about to have about death, dying, and loss. But I just wanted to see if you could talk into your experiences with death.
Yeah, sure. Well, my first memory, which is quite a significant one, my first experience with death was my pop on my dad's side. And he was probably mid to late 70s, and I was in primary school. I think I was probably maybe grade 5 or something, so I was like, or maybe not even that. I was around about 10 years old. And Pop was dying of cancer. So, and us kids didn't really know that. We just knew Pop as, we'd go around and Nan and Pop's, and we had heaps of cousins, and we'd always go around to Nan and Pop's. It was like the hangout zone, So we would always visit them, and I was really close with Nan and Pop, and especially Pop. And us kids, all the cousins, we would sit around the porch, and we'd listen to him talk about stories of the war. And one day we found out, us kids found out that Pop was going to die. He had cancer. And I remember as soon as I found out, I spent every day by his bedside with him. So every day after school, we used to live around the corner from Pop, and my school was on the way to Nan and Pop's house. So every day on the way to school, I'd call in and I'd visit in the morning, and then every day after school, I'd come and sit by his bedside until, almost dinner time.
Yeah.
And he would always talk about how he was ready, and that he was going to miss Nan, and he wasn't upset, or he was, he'd lived a good life, and he'd done what he had needed to do. He'd raised, they'd had 8 children, and he'd been in 2 wars, and he was married to the love of his life. They were married for 50 years.
Wow.
Almost 60 years.
Wow.
And so, but I remember one of the things was that I wasn't really, I missed him, but I wasn't really sad, because I had that time with him. I wasn't, and I remember I went to his viewing with Dad and Mum and all of Dad's siblings, and Dad was crying, and I sort of just looked up at Dad, and I was like, can I kiss him? And they were like, yep. So I gave him a kiss on the forehead, and it all seemed, I mean, that was sort of quite weird, because it was like, I was this 10-year-old kid, and here's this dead version of my pop, and you could just feel that he wasn't there. And, so that was, it was like a very definite experience of, my pop isn't in this body anymore. So, and I remember that, and it wasn't a traumatic experience. It wasn't a difficult, well, I mean, it was difficult, but it's not difficult to recall, and it never really has been. And I think it was the time that I spent with him on the way out was why it was a bit easier to handle, I guess.
Yeah, and to process, I guess, especially at 10 years old.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I've had quite a bit of death around me. We had 3 friends of ours die in a car accident at once. They were three of our mates. I was, I think, 14 or 15. I would have been 14. They were 16, and they stole a ute, and they were drunk, and they were smoking bongs, and the 3 of them were driving out to this party, and they just ran off the road, and 2 were killed on impact, and 1 died on the way to hospital, and they were just all completely mangled. And it was Ryan Batley, the one that we were closest to. Mum thought that it would be good for us to go to his viewing again, sort of so that it was real for us, and so that it was that we were able to close the door. Because one thing, it's interesting, that kind of brings me to one of my mum's experiences with death, is she lost her brother, Neil, when she was, I think he was 17 and she was maybe 14 or 15 or something like that. And he died in a motorcycle accident or a car accident. And so it was quite sudden. But Mum used to talk about how the siblings used to be quite, like the boys and the girls were quite separate from each other. Like they would even be walking along the street and be kind of like, hey, they weren't really, really close or anything. But her and Neil, but before he died, they started to get quite close. And then he passed away, and I think the only thing that Mum saw of him was his foot, or was it his big toe or something. I had this big conversation with Mum recently, because we were doing this 21-day abundance exercise, and it was all about regrets. Anyway, this came up for Mum, and one of her biggest regrets was not seeing Neil before, like not actually seeing him dead, because thank you, sweetie. Oh my God, have a look at this.
Oh, Uber wife.
My beautiful partner, yeah.
That's amazing.
I know, incredible. So yeah, Mum, I think for Mum, she felt that it was really important to be able to close that door, because she still struggles. She said that she dreamt about Neil for a long time, and that she, would go looking for him, and, for years after, she would think she would be seeing him in the street, and she just couldn't close the door. So that's why she always felt that it was important for us to do that. And as difficult a process as that is, I think it does help, because my stepdad, who basically raised us, he was my little sister. I've got 2 little sisters, my half sisters, and my brother. We're from my real dad, and then our stepdad is Zoe and Ella's father. He was there from basically when I was about 1 year old. So he was, I used to call him dad, and we had a father-son relationship. And he passed away when I was 17. He died of a stroke quite suddenly. And I actually never got to speak to him because he had a stroke, and I was away working. I was doing a sound job, a couple of hours away, and I got a phone call from Mum, and she said, "Oh, Andy's had a stroke." And I was like, "Oh, what do I do?" And I was ready to just pick up and go. And she's like, "It's okay. He's conscious. It's just a mild stroke. So don't worry. Like, just come tomorrow and come straight to the hospital." And I was like, "Okay." And then, so I finished this job. We came back home, and I was winding down. It was about 4 a.m. And I got a call from Mum, and Andy had had another stroke, and it was quite major. And so I went straight to the hospital, and he was completely unconscious. He was still alive, but he was in a coma. And, basically Mum and Granddad came over from WA, his father, and his daughter from his previous marriage, Tanya, our stepsister, who we're very close with still. She came over as well. And we all just sat. We were there with him, in the hospital room, and then he was moved to the kind of the care room, and it was kind of like the "you're not going to make it" room. It was like the terminally ill kind of ward. So we all knew that it was happening, and I remember being there by his bedside and kind of holding his hand and trying to get some sort of response from him. And I remember just asking him to squeeze my hand if he could hear me, and I just felt this very, very slight, and it must have taken all his strength, but he would have been able to hear us and not be able to respond. And it was that was definitely the hardest. That was, it's I don't know, grief is something that it never goes away. It's like a weight that you get used to carrying. You just get your muscles get stronger the more you go on. Because for years, even though Andy eventually passed away, and there was a few things I had, a few things of guilt that I had. I remember when he died, I'd had this idea. I was like, "Oh, I really want to play Dad a song," and my guitar was at home, sort of 15 minutes away. And we were like, "Oh, I don't want to leave." And so my stepsister Tanya, she said, I'll go with you, and we'll go and get it." And so Tanya and I had left. My older brother Judd had fallen asleep in the waiting room. And my two sisters were asleep as well. Zoe was, I think, 12 or 13, and Ella would have been 8.
Sorry, how old were you when this was going on?
I was just turning 17. I might have been 16, around 17 it was. And so my sister took me to get my guitar. My brother had fallen asleep and my sisters were asleep. And as we were gone, Andy passed away. And it was just my mum and Granddad by his bedside. And I feel like, I know in my heart that he was waiting to not die in front of us.
Right.
He was holding on.
Yeah.
For the right moment, because he wanted to go. He wanted us to not be there, because he was a very strong man, a very sort of stubborn, but in the most beautiful way.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
strong man and very strong for his kids and strong for his family. So, but I carried this guilt for a while that I'd taken Tanya away, that she couldn't be there
When
while
he
he died. Yeah, because I wanted to play. I wanted to get my guitar. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's there's magic in those moments, and how I can relate to that is that when my mum passed, basically we knew she was dying, and we took her from the hospital to our house, and she was there for 48 hours, and then all our old friends came over, like old friends and just people we haven't seen in ages. And then within those moments, it's fucking wild how it happens. But we'll by our side for, it wasn't so long, but it feels like a long time, right? When you're playing witness to someone transitioning. And when those really old friends came into play in the house, that's when she decided to actually transition. So it's yeah, I just believe there's a lot of magic in those moments, and it's the right timing, maybe. Like, I can really relate to you with what you're saying, but that's a huge for you, especially going from 14 to 17, experiencing all those things. You've experienced sudden death, expected death, and that's a lot to take on, man. And I'm really interested to hear about your grief journey and how you transitioned through that. Was it a lot different between the sudden death to expecting?
Um,
In terms of your processes, sorry, not the actual first response.
I think, I mean, I was, obviously I was quite young, so it sort of all just came as it came, and I don't really, it's difficult to recall, to be honest, because I feel like for a long time I was trying to be strong for a lot of other people. Um, like I always felt that uh, I had to be the father figure in a way for my sisters when dad passed. And, I had to sort of treat them the way that dad would treat them. And I sort of felt like it was my duty to teach them lessons in a way, which I know now that was just, I guess, me trying to keep dad there in a way.
Yeah.
Far as far as actually one common thing, and then this helps me through a lot of things, is my music. That's one really common thing. I actually, when Pity and Batley and Ron died in that car crash, I wrote them a song, and I played the song at Batley's funeral and Pity's funeral. But the family didn't want it at Ron's funeral, so I didn't play it there. But I wrote them a song, and I recorded it, and I gave it to the families. And the same with Dad. I wrote Dad a song, and I played it at his funeral. And I played those songs a lot for a long time, for years after they passed. And every time I played them, I would get these, vivid memories of that. Either I would get that sort of sudden feeling of grief, or that feeling of missing those people.
Yeah.
Or I would get memories of them, so it was for me, it was really valuable, and music has always been that for me. I mean, I've written a lot of music, when I've broken up in relationships and things like that. Like, music has been a real tool for me to heal.
Yeah. An expression.
So that's always been part of my process in grief, and sort of, continuing on through difficult times.
Yeah. And playing, what was that like, playing at a funeral, playing those songs? Like, You know, because I know that you've been quite successful with your music and you've played in front of crowds and all that sort of stuff. But,
Mm.
you know, obviously that was confronting for you, but, you know, you obviously pulled the strength to get it to do it. Um, were you really confronted by that? Were you kind of second guessing it, or were you just knew straight away, yeah, this is what I've got to do?
I knew straight away, and I wasn't second guessing it really ever. I sort of when I was playing the songs, I was playing them for them.
Yeah.
I wasn't playing it for me, and I wasn't playing it for anybody there. You know, there was, because Pity and Batley were the very popular guys. Basically, our whole school came. Our whole. I grew up in a small town, so
Mm-hmm.
basically the whole community was there. There was, hundreds and hundreds of people, like, in the church, out in the church yards and everything. It was, you know, yeah, there was heaps of people, but it wasn't. It was like they weren't there. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't.
You kind of zoned. I would imagine you would have zoned in, like you would have been just in
Yeah,
another place in a way, you know, just with them.
yeah, it was, and it was sort of, it was just, honoring them,
Mm.
and a lot of people did sort of come to me. Like, I mean, I've played at 4 funerals now. Actually, I played at my cousin's husband's funeral. He died suddenly in Japan. He went missing, and for weeks, and they found him.
Wow.
He broken his neck and was buried in the snow. And I played one of my songs that I'd written previously. My cousin just wanted that particular song, so she wanted me to play it, and same thing. It just, um, I didn't actually know him that well, but I was doing it for my sister, and I was doing it for her process, and I was doing it for that person, to honor that person's life.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so there was no real, and I think music is such a beautiful thing. It's such a healing thing. Um, and I sort of see the world as a huge vibration anyway. So it's a part
Mm.
of,
Mm.
it's a beautiful thing to incorporate into anything, really. So yeah, for me, it was just really fitting.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
And you know,
yeah.
you're an amazing artist, man. You are. I actually fell in love with your voice in Japan. You did kind of write me a song about the dog that I never got. Oh, no, it wasn't. Do you remember that? You actually did write a song about that dog. But
Did I?
I just remember in Japan. I just remember in Japan, you were just, you know, you're just really, really natural, and I just feel like you really embody it. You know, like when you play. Um, but back to the funerals. Have you ever done a eulogy at a funeral?
Um, no, I haven't.
Because
No.
when you were describing that, you know, playing, the only thing that, you know, I obviously haven't played it. I can't play an instrument. I'm not an artist, but you know, when I did my eulogy for my mum at my mum's funeral, man, I nearly had a fucking heart attack before just thinking of
Mm,
doing it. You know, like I think men, you know, find it hard to open up and be vulnerable one on one or in groups or whatever else, but let alone having, you know, 350 people in front of you and you're, you know,
mm,
pouring out your heart to that. It was I remember because the educator I'm working with at the moment, Zenith Virago, you know, she came up to me and said, like, how are you feeling? And I said, fuck, you know, I'm really caught up on, you know, being vulnerable. I just feel really overwhelmed. And she was like, forget the vulnerability, just be real. Let's not even
mm,
dive into the vulnerability. Just be real. And it really hit a note for me. And it just made me feel like, well, I was already emotional. I'm already, you know, available in that way. I don't need to get too deep into it. I just need to be real with where I'm at. Um,
mm,
and I remember doing it, and I knew I was just gonna fucking burst out crying. I just fucking knew it.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I was like, I had the shakes, and I was just like, had my hand on my chest, and I was just like slowly getting it out. But I know there was a moment in there, and I think that men really, you know, if men really go there and actually tap into that and you know, be vulnerable, it just like connects everybody. I know every man in the crowd was really like, fuck, you know, my brother-in-law came up to me and said, man, my heart felt like I was getting ripped out of my chest. And I said, like, you know, you can cry, but anyway, that's another story. But yeah, I think, you know, funerals and ceremonies are really transformational. And they've got so much power in them, especially if they're done right. You know, because in this country, as you know, it's just death happens real quick. And I'm not talking about the actual death of the person. I'm talking about the process from that person dying to the funeral. And yeah, and I think, you know, I think we need more culture in it. I think we need to bring back the ways of sorry business, and, you know, how they transition through grief. And, you know, man, they used to like have ceremonies for weeks, you know, weeks on end, and gather as a community. It was not like there was no individuals. It was the concept was community. And you know, it's just it's kind of like, I feel like people kind of get robbed in a sense, you know, like through that whole process of I think, you know, some funeral directors and can swoop in those moments. And, you know, all they want to do is to be secure and have someone sort it. So it's really really interesting. It's really, really interesting.
Yes, because you sort of went through a bit of a process with your mum, didn't you? I mean, you tried to. We had a bit of a chat the other day, and you mentioned.
Yeah, no, we did that. So I did a course with the lady Zenith, and it basically teaches you how to be a funeral celebrant, but more importantly, it teaches you of the processes involved if you do want to do it yourself. From you know, basically accompanying people who are dying, or accompanying the family of the dying person. It teaches you, you know, the specifications around building coffins. It teaches you all the legalities around it, paperwork, the processes, how long a body can be on a cold plate for, all of that. So when I did that, and it was funny because I actually looked on a video today that on YouTube that I stumbled across of me doing that course. And at the time I was like, what the fuck am I doing? I'll tell you actually a story. Laura came home and said, it's date night, it's Friday, I'm going to take you on a date. And I went, yeah, look, great. Let's go drink cocktails and have sex on the beach. Let's party. You know, that was fucking like 10 years ago. You know, I was a completely different person. And she told me, oh, look, I think we're gonna go watch a video on a documentary on death. And I was just like, what the fuck are we doing that for? I'm like, this is the last thing I want to fucking be talking about or watching. Anyway, long story short, I went and watched this documentary, and I'll send you a link to it. It's called Zen and the Art of Dying. It's about Zen and what she's been doing for the past 25 years. And it just fucking blew me away. I just was like, I was like, holy fuck, man. There is so much profound conversations, so many beautiful moments that I just witnessed slightly within that hour and a half. And deep down, I just thought to myself, that's what I want to be doing. Those are the conversations I want to be having. And it was crazy because Mum was actually going to do the course with me. And then she didn't end up doing it. And then at the time, you know, after I did the course, because I rocked up the course, and Zenith was like, the fuck are you doing here? She didn't know me. But it wasn't really the normal person that would be rocking up, you know. She didn't really get a lot of young people.
Yeah, right.
but you know, that just played such an important role when mum was dying. Number one, I understood the processes of what was happening when a body was shutting down and when someone was dying. So it didn't give me any false hope. And I was actually my grieving process started a lot earlier because I was like, fuck, she's actually fucking dying. She's not going to make it. And I was just remember walking around my property just in big circles, just going, fuck, like she's actually leaving. But afterwards it was just like, it was really hard, because I, built the coffin and did all that process, but I felt so fucking protective of her. And I was like, no way am I going to let someone else do this. It was my process and my family's process. And, we did it. Mum, we all got on the same page, brought mum home. She passed. We laid with her for 2.5 days. And then we, built the coffin. We put her in the back of the van, and drove her up to the crematorium. And it was weird. I remember driving up with Dad, and we remember looking at each other going, this is fucking nuts. We never thought, because, we had mum in the back, the aircon broke, and we're like, fuck, in those moments, we knew nothing would go wrong, but in those moments, we're like, oh, fuck, we've got to keep it cool. And yeah, but, it was just such a personal approach to it. And I really felt like, we really did mum proud. And afterwards, I was just like, I was just really proud of all of us. And because I told some people about it and they're like, what the fuck are you talking about? What do you mean you're going to lay with her? What the fuck? Like, it was too much for them, but it's so normal, as you know, like there's so many cultures, to what the indigenous used to do here, to a lot of countries, man. This is normal stuff. So, yeah, it just really helped me.
If anything, the way that we handle it is abnormal.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, I wonder why that is. I wonder why it's so quick. And why we lost that, because, I do know, 80% of the Australian death market is owned by American companies. So I know they want to keep it that way, whether or not that plays out and that's the actual thing, but there's no embodying it. It's just too quick. And even the conversation around death, it's the reason why I got this thing started, was because people are just like, oh, let's talk about that when it happens.
Yeah.
So fucking beneficial, man.
But it's always too late, because like you say, it all happens so quickly that you never have an opportunity to sort of go, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to best honor this person? What's our process? Someone just comes in and sort of, swoops in and just goes, this is how you do it. Don't worry about anything. You guys just, here you go, sign this, sign that. Here you go. There's the box in the ground.
That'll be $8,000. Thank you.
Yeah.
Nuts. Yeah.
And it's like, it is really quick. It's so quick. And, and it's one of, having been through it a few times, it doesn't start to feel normal. It's not, it's like, it doesn't matter how many times it happens. It's the same every time.
Yeah.
You don't get used to it. It's like, you don't just sort of all of a sudden go, oh no, that's just how it's done. It's like, no, that feels wrong. I know what you're saying. And it's, I don't know, there was this feeling, and I love that you guys did that. And man, there's so much, even in a time like that, there's this, and I feel like this is pretty much in almost every aspect of Western culture, is that there's this underlying social pressure to do things the way that society does them. Like, get married, have your kids, get your 9-to-5 job, employ your funeral director, pay your taxes,
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Follow the
and a lot
guidelines.
of this follow the guidelines. There's this big, and it's kind of, yeah. I mean, men don't really open up. I mean, there's a lot more of it these days, and there's a lot of groups, and yours included. Amazing what you're doing. That encourage people, not just men, to open up and talk about these kinds of things. And I think that's where things will change,
Mm,
is with individuals and groups getting together and discussing these kinds of things that are sort of, taboo in Western society.
mm,
That sort of stuff that isn't really challenged or talked about. Because I'd imagine that there would have been that underlying social pressure, which wouldn't have even needed to be voiced by anyone, but you would have had that in there. What are people going to think of us if we do it this way? And,
yeah, yeah,
what are we like? We're going to get all these judgments, and is it worth it? And it's like, and thankfully you guys of such integrity are like, no, fuck it. This is my mother and I'm doing what's best for her and for our family process, and screw what everyone else thinks.
mm,
But a lot of people wouldn't have that strength or that courage to do that. They would just go, oh no, people will think it's weird, so we won't do it. We'll just get the funeral director and they can just do it the way they do it,
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I agree.
So
Sorry, you go.
I just think it's important to have these kinds of discussions, and what you're doing and what Zenith is doing is important, and I think it will mean a lot to a lot of people down the line, when hopefully this sort of thing becomes a bit more mainstream, I guess, talked about and, looked at least, and go, are we doing things the right way? Are we really honoring our, our, our loved ones?
Yeah, yeah. I I thought I'd bring this up. I've been thinking about this lately, and I want to get your opinion about it. Is that I come across some people that go, "I'm not scared of death. I'm not, I'm not fearful of it. And this is just, whether it's my perception or judgment or what. But from what I've witnessed, even what I've witnessed, and you've witnessed a lot more in that regard to death. I don't know if I could actually, if someone would go to me, okay, you've got a week to live, you're dying, or a month, whatever it was. I don't know if I could actually answer that question and go, no, I don't think I'd be fearful. What's your take on that?
I know that I have been afraid of death, like in the past, and I don't really think about it. I know a lot of people do sort of think about it. I mean, I know my mum. My mum sort of, she was a very caring, loving lady, and she was always sort of worried that we were going to kill ourselves, buddy, on snowboards or whatever. She was always kind of fearful of something happening, But I think fear is fear, and if you, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's difficult to explain without being too airy fairy, but I have this belief that fear and love are the same thing, and that they're just on a spectrum. So you have fear, the extreme, over this way, and love, the extreme, over this way, and there's this balance of the two, and so I think it's possible to not be fearful of death. Absolutely.
Yeah,
I think it's possible to be in complete acceptance of it. But I think it's also just as possible for that same person to be fearful in any given moment of death. Like, I mean, why else would you, you know, like, I don't know, like jump out of the way of a bus or something like that? I mean, that sort of fear of being hit by the bus and killed is what sort of helps you to survive, and or that, and I don't know, maybe that's a bit of a too much of a crude sort
No,
of
no, I think that's,
explanation of it, but
I think it's great, and I think you know, I don't know until it happens to me. I don't know. I think I'm good at adjusting, but I think practicing, self-awareness and presence in your life. Presence is for me a big one that I think that will enable you to adjust and have that fear dissolve. Um, but I just thought it was an interesting question because I have there's a lot of people off the bat going, no, I'm not, especially in Byron. No, I'm not scared of death, and it just it's not that I don't believe them, but I question that one, they answer the question so quickly, and whether or not they've had a really big cup of tea of death yet in their life. But what I was my next question, which is what I'm really intrigued about and get to know of your ideas of is the gifts of death, and what are some of the gifts that death has taught you in your life? Because I know from me, it's just like this bag of jewels that I've described to a couple of people. It's like a bag of jewels that I'm just rediscovering all this fucking. I'm like, wow, I'm into that. I'm into this. Death has really made me feel alive. But what are the gifts for you?
Well, family really for me was like when Dad passed away, it brought our family together. You know, like we've always been close, but it really kind of cemented our relationship and our closeness, is having lost someone in the family, because it sort of just goes, well, it happens so quickly. What if someone else goes, and, like, I mean, recently, like, it's been quite a while since there's been any death in our family, apart from, I mean, quite recently, my brother's partner, he's 2 years older than me. He lives in Singapore, and his partner, she took her own life
Right.
in December last year, and that, I mean, that was something that obviously nobody really expected at all. It came very much out of the blue. And, Judd was over there, and Judd was always very independent. He was very hard to get a hold of. We wouldn't speak to him for months and months sometimes. And it was always kind of like, oh, that's just Judd. He just doesn't keep in touch, and that's cool, And especially him and I, we sort of never really, we're the closest, we're really good mates, but we'd never be like, call each other up and go, hey, how you going? Like,
Yeah.
we just, when we saw each other, that was that. But when Vanessa passed away, we started freaking out. Judd was alone in a foreign country, and he actually found her, and we couldn't get a hold of him for hours, and it was really quite frantic. And yeah, I mean, it was a really horrible situation. But what happened was my dad and my stepmom and my mum and my stepdad, they, not Andy, who I was speaking of before, but Phil, my mum's current partner, they all went over to support Judd, and they made it for the funeral. I think Mum made it for the funeral, and then Dad made it shortly after for the wake. And interestingly, it's a bit of backstory, but we sort of we didn't really have a very communicative relationship with our dad. And again, as I said before, Judd was very sort of removed from the family as far as like communicating and saying, hey, I'm okay, and hey, I love you guys, and you know, talking about his feelings and opening up and sort of saying, you know, he would always be, yeah, I'm fine, when obviously he wasn't fine, or, you know, he wouldn't open up to us and we couldn't connect with him on a deeper level. But I truly believe the fact that dad and mum made it there. Also the fact that mum and dad split up when we were very young, when Judd would have been 2.5 years old.
Yeah.
And for them to come together to support him and go and support him in that experience, I think was such a huge thing for him and for all of our family. Because, you know, at almost 40 years old, he's, you know, just this, you know, he's had this experience that's just completely floored him, and he's like this little boy again, you know, this little Justin that's in the foreign country without his mum and dad, and sort of having never had that mum and dad family unit, you know, that did affect us in that. For a lot of years, I was always like, no, I'm fine, and I wouldn't open up with my feelings until quite recently. I joined a men's group, which has been amazing for me. But for Judd, he hasn't had that, and so for him, this experience has really opened him up. And like we were speaking every single day. He was saying, you know, oh, this is fucked, and I'm feeling like this, and blah blah blah. Like he was really just being raw and open, and we hadn't seen that from him, and for, you know, all of his adult life basically.
Yeah.
And you know, so Vanessa's death was obviously really horrible, but it's brought us this beautiful place in our family where we're connected again, and we speak every week, sometimes a couple of times a week, which used to be unheard of for us, you know. And we all get on Messenger, and we're all there, and the kids are there, and it's really beautiful. And if Vanessa hadn't have passed away, that wouldn't have happened. So, you know, we're grateful for her life, and we're grateful for where we are now. And that's all we can be. It's just kind of honor her decision, because it's very easy to be angry with her. But we never were. And I think maybe mum was struggling in the first couple of days. She was like, why did you do this to him? And that sort of thing. But quite quickly she came around and realized that it was her decision, and that she had to honor her decision, and that, you know, mum got the opportunity to really be mum again. You know, and dad got the opportunity to really step up and be dad, you know, and they did it beautifully. And you know, we used to never really hear from dad either, but now dad's really stepped up, and he calls us every week. And when he used to complain, oh, you never call me, and but it's like, well, you never call us. But now dad's always messaging us, hey boys, like, let's catch up and have a chat. And, you know, so it's changed. You know, this person, Vanessa, who you know, is from a completely different culture, we had nothing to do with us until the last couple of years of her life, and you know, has changed the way my father approaches his relationship with his sons, you know. So it's a really amazing kind of, the way that energies work like that is really incredible. And as horrible as some of these experiences can be, I believe that there's always that sort of, those beautiful things embedded within those.
Yeah, so, without a doubt. And that's one of the gifts of death, man. That's like, it's a perfect example of it. And sometimes from death, you know, it can split families up, depending on what role that person played. You know, that might have been the glue in the family, and then whack, they're gone, and then splits them up or brings families together. Right. But you know what? I really appreciated your wording around that when you described taking her own life. And, you know, I think the wording around committing suicide or failed attempt of suicide, all that has a really it's like a criminal mindset about it. Like if you date back years ago, if I was to attempt suicide and I failed at it, I could be charged, and then the state actually kill me for that. So that was actually a criminal act. So you weren't allowed to take your life, but they could, and it's you know yeah, it's a really interesting conversation. It's a really interesting conversation around that, because I feel like suicide has a very big charge behind the word, and there's so much, you know, to unpack with that. It's really interesting. So I really did appreciate your wording around that, because a lot of people do use, including myself until, you know, maybe 6 months ago, you know, I changed my wording around it, because a lot of people think that people that commit suicide have to have a mental illness. And that might be a case for a lot of people, but it's not the case for everybody. Some people are just fed up. And in my opinion, I feel like they have that right to take their life.
Yeah, well, I mean, for us, like, we had to come to terms with that, and you know, Judd had to come to terms with that, and you know, for him, they, you know, they had issues, like they'd had a fight the night before,
Right.
or I think it was that night or something. There was, you know, they'd had a fight, and you know, things weren't going so well, and she went to the other room and Judd fell asleep. And so, you know, then there comes the guilt again, where it's like, if only I had have not fallen asleep, if only I had have gone and checked on her, you know, all of that sort of thing. And, you know, and then, you know, there's kind of speculation that perhaps she was only trying to do it to, you know, as a kind of a scare thing or something, and then accidentally, you know, failed and actually, you know, and actually took her own life. But I don't know, there's all these things that go around in your head, and you go, she couldn't have, but then, you know, she could have, and she did, you know. And that was a decision that she decided to make. I mean, you can't kind of go through, I mean, she the way she did it, there was preparation involved. So
Right.
that thought had to be there for quite some time, and the decision had to be made in each moment that she continued to prepare, you know. So there's quite a definitive decision that she had to make. So it's sort of, you need to be very sure when every moment passes and you're making those preparations.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I can't imagine being in a position where that's the best option, you know, because to me, I can't see it any other way that she had, of course she had other options, but that was the best one.
Yeah.
And that was the one that she chose, that she thought was going to be the best for her. And perhaps she thought it was the one that was best for Judd and everyone else in the world. And I mean, you know, it's as difficult as it is to say something like this, but maybe she was right. Maybe that was the best thing. And that's how the universe kind of works. Things happen for a reason. And that's the way I see it anyway, is good or bad, you know, things happen for a reason. And it can be difficult to say that sort of thing. Maybe it was best, you know, maybe that was the best option, you know. And I love Vanessa. She's a beautiful girl. And you know, her and Judd's relationship was something that I cherished, because I could see how happy he was. And, but something has changed in him. And I know that something has changed for the better in him. So,
9:00.
Yeah, that's...
Well, it's one of those things still. It's like once you know death, you can't unknow it. There's no reversing that shit anymore, regardless of what your experience of it is, whether it's sudden, expected, whatever it is. Once you know death, you can't unknow it. And, I relate that back to before I had kids, and I used to have mates come up to me and go, "Oh, you won't have any time." I'm like, "Yeah, no, I totally get it." And I was fucking naive. I had no clue, but until I had no time and I was exhausted and I was emotional and I was stripped of everything, I was like, that's what the fuck they were talking about. And I think that, that really made sense to me of when I experienced death. I was like, yeah, I get it. I totally get it. So yeah, once you know it, you can't unknow it. Yeah, it's a special thing. But hey, I've got to wrap it up soon. But before we wrap it up, man, and this is going to be it might not be a hard one for you, but from what you've gone through with death, if there's anyone listening that is in a similar situation and experience, what sort of advice could you give to someone who would be experiencing it?
Well, for me personally, the thing that has helped me, and I can definitely see, especially recently with my brother, is connect with people close to you, connect with your family, and don't shy away from any feelings that you have, whether they're good or bad, whether it's anger, whether it's guilt, whatever it might be. It's important to feel those feelings and to unpack them in some way. And I think a lot of people, myself included, sort of feel like by thinking about things or just allowing things to have time will pass and time will heal. But I don't think so. I think time can harm as much as it can heal if you don't process things.
Yeah.
And that could be, for me, it was music. In my younger years, these days, when Vanessa passed away, was connecting with my brothers, connecting with my family, talking about things, connecting in my brother's group and talking about these things, crying openly, being open with my emotions, being open with when I feel like shit and I don't want to fucking do anything. I don't want to talk to anyone. Honor that, I want to, like, I don't want to eat. I don't want to, I just want to stay in bed. Give yourself a day in bed, but don't stay in bed for weeks, like you have to put one foot in front of the other and trudge through the muck. Whether you know what direction you're going in or not, you have to move, so I think, when emotions don't get moved around, when they just sit there and they're stagnant, that's when it can really be harmful, and it's very subtle, and it can happen without you even knowing, especially if you let things just fester for a long time. So my advice would be move it around however you can, journaling, speaking to people close to you. If it's not someone in your family, maybe it's someone you trust, someone that you can open up to, or write about it, paint it, sing it, whatever it is, or
express it,
express it. Yeah. Express it.
Mate, you hit the nail on the head. You really did that. And Dill, I love you, bro. It's, I've just thought so much of you from the get-go, and it's, I don't have a whole bunch No, I do have a whole bunch. Well, it's not heaps, but there's not too many men I've got that you can just call up after years and just went whack and just meet each other there. Um, but
Yeah,
for
yeah,
you, you're without a doubt emotionally available, and you're just so into that, and I just respect it. And I really respect you stepping into your vulnerability tonight and just going there. So thank you, bro. Um,
thank you,
and
man. It's been an absolute pleasure and honor. And, you know, I echo those sentiments because it's just beautiful, like to, you know, from the moment we met, it was just like that.
Mm,
And it doesn't matter how many years passed. Every time we do, we connect. It's like
juicy.
that first time. Yeah, it's not like we don't have to warm up. It's just we're straight back there. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah, yeah, no, I totally get it. I totally get it.
you know, it's like we've been talking every day.
Every
Like it's
day,
like
yeah,
we've
yeah.
been speaking to each other every day. You know, and it could have been years. I mean, last time we spoke
It probably
before
was.
that phone call a couple of days ago was, I don't
Yeah,
know,
a long time.
5 years ago.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah,
And
something
before we
like that.
finish up, what the hell is for dinner? What do you got to what do you
Um,
dinner, man? I was gonna prompt you, but we're on a roll, and you've what have you got? Tell us about
so I've, wow,
it.
I wasn't even sure actually, but looks like I've got this sort of beetroot pumpkin salad with peas and cauliflower and feta with roasted garlic and butter mushrooms.
Yum, yum.
Yeah,
Awesome, bro.
amazing.
Well, you enjoy
So
that,
I'm
man.
looking forward to that.
And
Thanks, man.
let's talk in the next. I think we're gonna go. I'm gonna get on your podcast. I know, and we'll light it up. We'll do some
Yes,
internal
please. Yeah,
dating.
sounds awesome, man.
Wait, bro. Lots of love, brother. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, lots of love to you, man, and lots of love to your family. Um, yeah,
Thanks, bro.
thanks, man.
All right, man.
Absolute honor.
Talk to you soon.
All right, brother.
See
See
you,
you,
mate.
brother.
Bye.